to get to know the client and increase that trust on the
Yeah.
front side.
Yeah.
That's another one of those good examples of a good GC that can consult on something like an SBA loan. I mean, that doesn't seem like traditionally something a GC would consult
No.
a client on, but that's a good piece of information that could really make a big difference.
We, if you're tuning in, go ahead and comment. Let us know what you think about this. We've gotten into the topic of lending, but generally we're talking about coordination, and lending does tie in directly to that because there's only so much money you've been able to get from the underwriting process, and often it's not enough money to spend extra 80 grand on a light commercial thing for coordination drawings.
Yeah.
And so in exchange for that, it's better to have somebody that has experience walking you through it. Design build. We like the design build process ourselves, but somebody who's going to give you the best, most realistic picture of what to expect. How likely are we going to need that contingency, and how much is a realistic contingency? If you're not going to pay for the coordination, you might want that contingency to be a little higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if it's adaptive reuse. Nobody knows what's behind these walls. We might wake up to a $40,000 problem, and it's not anybody's yet. There's no blame. It's just, it's there. We found it,
Well, and to honestly, if you really were to put a price tag on that level of hard bid coordination, you wouldn't want to pay it. Like no developer would want to pay it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have, I would believe that your soft costs would double if you really got the level of coordination that everybody was hoping for.
Yes.
Up front.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. Because that's so true.
Yeah.
Because the effort is more than double on our side. It would be 2, maybe 3 times the cost of to go through all of that coordination. We try to find that reasonable balance. And that balance for me is somebody that's experienced in building this thing we're designing, and somebody you've had a relationship with and that you trust. Otherwise, that's why I don't like the design bid stuff, because you're going to find the sharks that are just looking for the change order, looking for the problem, and they'll say, I did it to the drawings, and it's always untrue because the drawings have crazy amounts of specs that you're required to fill. So I always say, you didn't do it for the drawings, you did it to the picture.
Yeah.
Floor plan.
You know how to draw a picture. Good job. You know how to read little pictures, but what about the 2 pages of
And the war's
specification?
on.
Yeah, right. And then it's like, so I try to start that when I'm at that meeting you described, right? I try to start by saying, listen, can we, off the record, before we get in front of the client, can you agree to not say I did it per the drawings, and I'll agree you didn't, to not say you failed to follow my spec, because that's what's always going to be is you'll say per the drawings, I'll say you failed the spec, and then now that's all we're pissing over instead of the real problem, solving a real problem, being on the same page. Sorry if I said the P word again. I don't know the rules about bad words.
You got one more time to say the P word on LinkedIn before you're out, buddy. You're going to be banned.
Oh no, we lost that camera.
Oh, it's got, it's got the...
Oh, I just could restart it. We got Phil here on the line. Let's see if we can bring him in. Hey, Phil.
Hey, what's up?
What's up, brother? You see,
Yeah.
what's up, Phil? Go ahead. I'm going to go fix a little camera issue. Y'all can keep riffing.
Yeah. One of the cameras that's like above you guys' head there's something in the way of it too. It's like blocking Stuart's face. Just FYI.
Oh, it's the light.
Little production note.
Yeah, thanks,
Appreciate
buddy.
it, Phil.
Good looking out.
Yeah.
Phil's holding the permanent fort down while we're out pretending to be podcasters.
Yep.
Got to do what you got to do, man.
Yeah.
And honestly, I love that you guys are doing it, because for years that's what we struggled with, is that as a GC, you look like the white pickup truck with a ladder rack, that's there to upcharge and change order and all these other bad, industry words to people and take advantage of people. And it's this stuff that people care about that you're pouring in. You're trying to be an information source. You're trying to be a resource in the industry and to give away that information to just be better and set yourself apart. So,
yeah. Try to encourage some of those open, honest conversations about the struggles that we all have with each other or externally with the clients, or the whole process in general, especially since this is such a niche kind of market that we're in, the small construction part of it at least. A lot of the same problems across this different jobs. We back on? There we go. Phil, is that thing still in the way? Actually, let me get... Yeah, let me...
Yeah, split screen is
Phil out.
wonky.
How about let me take you out, Phil?
oh yeah.
Phil back in. Welcome back.
Yeah, we were
Phil?
on the skeleton crew production people. So if you're just tuning in, Phil is in here. You can call in just like he's called in. You see him on our screen. If you want to join in the conversation or ask questions to Stuart, he's a GC. We've worked with him for many years. He's got a lot of experience and great insight. Extremely gifted in the problem-solving territory and the communications territory, which is a must for a GC or an architect at that, like the PM, design bid. It's kind of like the architect and design build. You're driving it. And so if you're tuning in, leave comments, let us know. We're the engineers, and we're what we're saying is that we should get away with never coordinating anything ever. Just kidding. Yeah. Well, that's how it seems. That's a lot of people feel like, and they're not wrong, but what's not known in these conversations is how little we're paid to be doing that. And I think a lot of people think the ductwork, people don't understand for the HVAC design, ductwork layout is like maybe 5% of the whole effort. We're talking the code studies, energy code, the equipment selections, what's going to be right. Can it work with gas? Oh, no, we don't have gas. Can we do electrical? Oh, suddenly the strip heat's not going to work. Now we need a service upgrade. Hey, Stuart, do we have 3-phase anywhere nearby? That kind of stuff. And then the ductwork gets laid out. But the builder, like that's pretty much most of the install, I would guess, is installing that ductwork. And so they say, well, I'll do the design for you. I've heard that before. It's like, okay, ductwork design is basically the first thing you teach a junior engineer, not to discredit what it is, but it's pretty easy to lay out ductwork.
Yeah.
And engineers often are pretty bad at it because we're not building it. So we are lacking that perspective from how hard will it actually be to do this?
Yeah. Well, and that's like in the past, we've done that where it's been sort of a collaboration, especially on some old churches where it's our restoration or something. And I'll have the luxury of having some of these old salty dog subs that are on the job.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, look, just put it on the back of a napkin. I'll send it to the engineer guys. If that's how you want to build it, that's going to end up being a better product for us in the long run, then let me do it. And then I send it to you and you're like, oh man, this totally looks like a guy that's been in the industry for 30 years. Let's just do that. And then they get the drawings back. And it's so funny because they're almost chapped at that point. They're like, I knew he was going to, all he did was copy my drawing. And I'm like, that's what we asked him to do. Like that's your experience coming out on the page. Like you should be proud of that. And for some reason they're always chapped. They're like, oh man, I can't believe he did that. Like he didn't even add anything different. I'm like,
he stole my design. I should have copywritten that.
Basically, yeah. And I'm like, just stop.
Well,
Please stop.
That's why even a design build, I've been encouraging people to pay the GC and the trade contractors consulting fees to be at the table, because they can just visualize it better than any engineer. I mean, we spend our entire career reading nerdy codes. Like, that's just what we do. And then, the trade contractor spends their literal entire life mastering the art of fabricating and installing ductwork. So who better to be there at the table to just talk about the best point A to point B approach? And then we say, great, that works for us. Now we'll go bare face into the energy code and figure out, do you need an energy recovery ventilator or add a window to do natural ventilation, all the tricks that we can play. But yeah, I know that's the perspective. We've had that happen with y'all before, where electrical single line, I think, came from your electrician, and we loved it, and we basically used it straight up.
Yeah. Lead times, they know more about that than we do too. So a lot of the jobs recently have been changing our single lines because of lead times. Once it was 600 amp panels you couldn't get a hold of. Now it's 4. I always joke that soon enough, every building's going to have like 10 60 amp panels across the wall.
Just duct tape together.
Yep. That's all we can get.
You're going to take some Cat 6 cables and just strip them and just make new conductors out of them.
100 of them.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's a good industry. I really love this industry, as stressful as it is, because of the relationships, but also how people can make a good living from it without even an education or even a high school degree, really, the skill itself. So that's fine.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it was a Harvard Business Review or something the other day. It was a well-renowned publication, and it was talking about post-pandemic how much the trades have increased in their yearly salaries based off of experience, and it charted a carded electrician versus a cardiothoracic surgeon, and you'd think like these two are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But what they factored in was malpractice insurance, cost of schooling, when you enter
time to study.
Yeah, when you entered the workforce, a lot of times too. And the electrician beat the cardiologist until he turned 52.
Wow.
I believe
Yeah,
it.
and you got to think too, like, and that
Stripes,
was just sort of
stress.
straight line, against their general expenditures and cost of doing business as it related inside of a vacuum.
Yeah.
That electrician had bought single family homes and started renting them and flipping them or something like that as a side hustle. I don't know that the cardiologist would have ever beat him.
Yeah, because you get so much experience in the real estate world from that,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
might
I
end
mean,
up
you can
with
fix it
15 rental
yourself.
properties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All these trade contractors now and the GCs and
Yep.
guys with bulldozers and all this stuff that just
Yep.
comes with that life. Like it's a
That life.
that
Street
life.
life.
If you're here listening in, feel free. Phil, I'll let you. You got a thought here, but feel free to comment. Let us know what you think about who to yell at more when it comes to coordination failures: the GC or the engineer. I'm just kidding. But let us know your thoughts on coordination, or if you want questions answered from an engineer or a GC. That we're here with Evans Construction, and you can also just join in the conversation, just like Phil has. Phil, go ahead. Let us know what you.
Let me drag
What's
you
on
up to
your
the
mind?
I was
top,
just
Phil.
gonna say the other benefit of for the electrician is the thoracic surgeon doesn't have an engineer to blame for anything going wrong. So,
Good point.
that's another
Yeah,
benefit
true.
for them.
those pesky
true.
engineers, man.
That's true.
We're starting to slowly accept our plight, which is to just exist
plight.
and be a little bit annoying to everyone.
Plate of plate.
Yeah, a plate of plate. It is what it is what it is. But having relationships with like folks like you, Stuart, it just makes it a lot more enjoyable. We're looking forward to continuing that in these conversations and having people understand it, see it from all perspectives. GCs that are bid work only. How much of it do you do? Do you bid on project? Is all design build?
Well, our process is a little bit different. It was born out of our religious facilities work. All three of the generations have done it a little bit differently, but in this generation, we decided to have a big emphasis on religious facilities work because, like you said, these developers that come in and they get their lending, like that SBA loan we just talked about, that is sort of capped, that lending. You have to use what's called pie chart economics, that if the change orders get to a certain point, because that piece of pie has gotten so much bigger, other pieces of pie have to get smaller. Well, nobody understands that more than a church or religious facility because they can only raise but so much. And lending is very, very difficult as it relates to church because you're basing it off of money that hasn't come in yet. You're just hoping continues to come in. And it's not a real business model. They're not selling a tangible good. People are coming and they're tithing and they're doing the best they can to keep the church open, and being good stewards of that became extremely important for us because most of the committee members that will volunteer their time to help build a new location or a new facility or a new addition onto that facility are not from the industry. It's always this nice smattering of who the church is. It could be an elementary school teacher. It could be a retired doctor. It could be, it's always some contracting guy. It's always like, but he built decks or built a house or something in there. And it's this mix of people, and you have to get that process in place to where they understand what it's like to build a multi-million-dollar facility.
Yeah.
When the biggest investment they ever made in their lives usually is the purchase of their home. And about half of that committee has only ever gone through the process to build their own home. So they're going from 0 to 1,000 really fast. And that's where we decided to be experts at teaching that process so that they can make educated decisions based off of our experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I always thought about this is a different industry, but like catering or being a photographer for weddings is probably the most frustrating job because it's like this one-time experience for somebody. And same thing with single family dwelling kind of design and construction. It's like very big. They're not as experienced. It's this one very important thing, and every single tiny decision is like scrutinized, and it makes it difficult as a professional. Be like, trust me, I've done this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it similar with churches? You find that like you have a lot more of like walking through every detail with them through the decision making process.
Yeah. And it's to be expected. We don't expect them to know. I mean, and what's been so fortunate for us is we birthed this process out of doing it in religious facilities because we would break it down and we would slow the process down and we would help them to understand what they were about to invest in. And then they would get options out on the table based off our experience of a good, better, best. And then they feel empowered to grab a hold of whatever they feel like is what's their DNA at the church, or
Yeah.
that they can make their own, and there's comfort in that. Well, what we didn't expect was we started doing that process with our developers too, and they love it just as much. I mean, the guys that have been doing it for 25, 30 years,
Yeah.
they're doing it usually at the higher level. They're doing it on so many different projects where it may have been a hard bid scenario where it's this constant fighting and bickering and back and forth that they're now being drawn into the middle of. When they have that sort of solace that exists outside of that in our process, they go, "Oh, you just want to know whether it needs to be blue or green?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love blue.
Okay. Yeah. Blue works for me.
Off they go." You know?
Yep. Yeah, that is the art of communication on ultimately in any industry.
Yeah.
You know, the managing expectations, communicating, and back to the design build thing and trust and the research that you were talking about. What Carter was talking about earlier was we read a paper. They took 40 projects in China and studied them and used AI to predict the delay cost, like the actual time delay and the overage cost risk that broke the risk into delay and project price overage. And so they studied it. They had all these factors, 5 major categories and 15 minor or 20 minor, something like that categories. Somehow got a way to get the industry experts to sort this out through their statistics and analytics. And at the end of that research, they ran it through a neural network to make predictive guesses on the risk. So they trained the model, the network, with 30 of the projects with real data about what actually happened using these factors. And then they used the neural network to predict the next 10 that they had data for, and it predict with crazy accuracy what the actual amount of dollars overran and the time delay for each of these 10 predicted projects. And what they found was the most sensitive risk factor was experience. Actually, second most. The other one was like political. Like if the government says you can't build this anymore, you know,
Which
it's a
that's
big
its
risk.
own animal.
Yeah, right.
It's like the sun, the prism shining through the building. It's like you can't really control that.
Yeah, that one's obviously a huge sensitivity, but the other sensitivity was the relationship between folks and then also just the general experience. So I've been trying to address this coordination thing instead of trying to enforce 1,000 coordination drawings, which are like on the drawings as a spec. Say, well, let's try to enforce who it is that'll be building these things better. You know, the trade contractor that's built restaurants, not the one that's done multifamily only for 20 years and now is doing his first restaurant. Because he's going to be the he or she or the they're going to be the first one that's going to straight up be like, I did it per the drawings, and it's going to become an SHI.
Yeah.
Last letter word. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that either. LinkedIn.
TSHO.
So I think that research really taught me. That's why I think it's a success when we work together, because your contractors, we know you. We start just going to solving the problem as quickly as we can, and as opposed to it starting at the table. What did it for the drawings, and go from there.
It just dives back into that process too. Again, it's that because we know that the drawings, I mean, I don't care which set you put out, and I don't care who drew them. I don't care how big the firm is. I don't care if they have a 150-story high-rise in downtown Manhattan, and that's it's full of nothing but thousands of engineers. They're still at some level going to get some of it wrong that requires this.
Yep.
So seeing as that's your constant in this science experiment,
Yeah.
let's just take that and park it over here, and let's figure out how to better deal with that.
Yeah.
And you can have a much leaner set of documents that none of us have spent as much time on when instead of our superintendent calls the HVAC guy out to say, hey, we're ready. We're going to be ready in 10 weeks. And this is what it's going to look like. The submittals are done as fast as you can in the beginning of the job to flesh out any inconsistencies. Prior to them starting, they'll have walkthroughs with the ownership of the HVAC firm or plumbing firm or electric firm. We're not picking on HVAC just as it is. It's just what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But they'll come out and they'll see issues, but now they've seen it weeks in advance. Well, now we have plenty of time to do a corrective measure to where we've made an edit and it comes out, and then their install guys can just fly versus, I mean, because they love it the least of all when you've run 150 foot of duct you have to take back out, and then who pays for it and why they pay for it. The more that you can preemptively answer all those questions, the easier it is, regardless of the bid methodology.
It's almost like two things have to happen at the early stages of a bid. If it's a bid project I'd like to see the consulting rate of a professional installer, like a GC and the trade contractors at the table during design, but then also throughout construction, more of a willingness to have an engineer just like be there occasionally and have the budget for that too. Because, we don't have to redraw everything, but just, we'll show up a couple site visits or this or that, and then be a part of what's happening as it's unfolding instead of just being told randomly, there's a problem. We need it urgently there. But if we're in the field occasionally, it's hard to know the exact level of support, because we don't need to be there every single day. We really don't need to. But the presence, the conversations, even just a virtual call occasionally to support the project would be better than obsessing over hours of extra drafting time.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yep. I mean, I don't know what everybody's situation is in this call right now, but I've been married for 15 years, and I still have to talk to Joy to know what the hell is going on in our lives. We still, as the classic Carter's mom's phrase, because she has to get credit for this. I didn't take my mind reading pills this morning, which is true for everybody. It's true. I've been married to this lady for a long time. I still don't know what she's thinking all the time. So, that goes without saying. I might never. Yeah, you have to talk to each other. And so you go into a project where there's a sub who feels very self-confident about how they install things, who've been doing it for 25 years. You have an engineer who has studied this like in depth. They've studied so many parts of this that no one else has seen. And they've been in the industry for as many, and then you have all of these different parties who really, worst case scenario, just don't respect what each other is doing. You know, best case scenario, we're totally ignorant of what each other is doing, So if we don't start with that assumption that we have to build some relationship in every project, it's just like something that has to be built in. It's regardless of if you like anybody there or not, or if you are frustrated with how it's going. The only way for it to go better is for you to have some kind of relationship with other people there.
No, 100%. Like that's one of my phrases I used. My grandfather started the original version called Heindel and Evans back in the day. One of his favorite sayings was figure out how to end the job where your client gets the spider ring. And it's so funny because I don't know that I've told you this one or not, but at the dentist office when we were kids, they had that, cardboard treasure chest, and, it had spider rings and all, like little baby yo-yos and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what he was talking about, is figure out a way for your client to get the spider ring, because, they realized that they could have pulled that kid's tooth, but he got a spider ring to go home with, and it ended well. Like nobody's assuming that it's going to be perfect throughout the whole process, but make sure it ends well for you and the client.
Yeah.
Because we can disagree about how to do things. I mean, a lot of times we disagree on, especially churches, how to construct them, because they're one-time use sort of things. I mean, they get used one day a week. A lot of these smaller Southern Baptist churches that get used one day a week. And I'm like, the HVAC can't cost that much, Kitty. They're only going to use it for 47 minutes.
Systems, please.
Like
get your dough out
I've had
of
that
here,
phone
Kitty.
call with Stuart a few times.
Exactly. But it's at the end of the day, we always tend to end well. And Chase says it best, is like, you got to get over the trust hurdle with everybody that's on the team. And once you're on the other side of the trust hurdle with people, it almost doesn't matter which direction you head, because they know that the leaders are up there taking them where they need to end up. And it's less of this Hardy Boys choose your own adventure book where they're like, oh snap, we landed in the snake pit again, over and over and over again.
Well, and that starts early too, because a lot of times the first time we hear from a contractor or anybody is an RFI talking about a change order.
Yeah, it's like too late. It's like now it's very difficult to get over the trust hurdle. But I do find that what we've learned is, as Permissive has evolved over the past year, we've gone through a lot of major transformation in how we want to approach engineering. We have much better engineers now, but we were approaching things a little bit differently. But what we've decided is that 10 minutes, don't obsess over whether this or this isn't in the scope when it comes to just calling, making a 10-minute phone call, because that's just so disarming. That's the most practical, disarming thing to build that trust. It's just like, hey man, I'm the engineer. I'm the one that's probably, the bane of your existence, whatever. Try to like build a bit of trust and be like, I heard there's an issue. Can you tell me what's going on? And then now that's not like RFI documentation. Every email gets misinterpreted.
Well, And y'all are so good at that too, because at the end of the day, you're very approachable to other solutions. Like there's a lot of engineers and architects in the industry that would just as soon die on the vine than to change the methodology, regardless of whether it's feasible, which is really tough when you've been in the industry like we have. My brother and I have been since we were 11 years old. I mean, we had hard hats on every summer, all summer long.
Yeah.
So we've got a working age of like a 65-year-old, even though we're in our 40s.
Yeah.
And to sometimes talk about it, because we remember what those buildings were built like. Like we've seen the methodologies change throughout the years. So to have those conversations with people where, like you guys, that are open to saying, hey, it's not a good, better, best. It's a, hey, this may not have been possible, but we can do this instead, or we can do this. And that's all offline stuff. That's us as professionals pouring into each other going, hey, how do we get better? How do we sharpen each other's to the point where we're in that vein where the owner believes we are. And then at that point, there is no RFI to write or checks and balances that need to happen, because the team of leaders that has been hired has decided where we're headed.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff, man. This is the thing this is the stuff of coordination. We'll see how this evolves, because we'll be talking to architects too, and I'm just curious, do they prefer the design bid? I know that the theory, at least I believe it is, that somehow you can have better control over the quality, and you're decoupling like the builders, like incentives.
Yeah.
You know, it's I don't know. What is your perspective on the reason you think that might exist?
I believe that there's this. So if you thought of it more like a science experiment inside of a vacuum, then absolutely.
Yeah.
And assuming all GCs are built exactly the same, assuming all engineers and architects are built exactly the same, and lastly, assuming all owners are going to act exactly the same.
That was one of the major risk factors on that study, by the way.
Correct.
The owner's experience. Yeah.
Because owners can make it difficult. Like you talk about the difference between a seasoned developer that understands the value of trust with their team, that when they call up and the third-party inspector's out there on site and there's bad dirt, and it's 1,000 yards of bad dirt, they already have unit prices from good contractors that already pre-told them this was going to happen. They already had it in their pocket. They added it up on the back of the napkin real quick, and they were like, yes, let's just take it from the builder's the shared contingency and move forward. And done. It took 30 seconds. Now, one of your hedge-based firms, or a more, I guess, multi-tiered or multi-layered, responsibility type firm that might be a big franchise, or bigger national groups.
Yeah.
They go, all right, that's 1,000 yards. What's the unit rate? Well, that's the unit rate in the contract. I don't know what the unit rate is. Can you send it to me? And then you send it in an email. And then they go, well, that's ridiculous. Well, they don't understand. Well, that's the unit rate you agreed to. Well, now we're back and forth. We're negotiating. All the while, everyone's stopped.
Yeah.
And who's paying all of them to stop but us, the subcontractor, the GC, all of them. And that time and that slack that we fight so desperately for our superintendents to help us draw out of the job so that it ends faster, a lot of times points back to the owners.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's one of the things I hope gets repeated throughout this, not to throw our owners under the bus, but that it's really, a lot of this is how they approach their level of trust with the person.
It's all based off level of trust.
Yeah, like, do you trust me to make these decisions on your behalf? Why else would you hire an actual professional?
Well, in our process, especially with our religious facility stuff, one of the first things we do, because we do have that experience on the lending side where we know where those metrics with what does your annual tithes and offerings for your budget and those one-time gifts for tax benefit and all that. We know the metrics of all that finances at a church level. So therefore we understand real early what your capacity to borrow is going to look like.
Yeah.
So one of our first steps with that is, because if you trust us enough to dive into that, we can tell you exactly how much you can borrow and be safe to not be building rich and mission poor, which is your point in all of this. Once you get to that point, you now know what you can spend. And then that's the very next question that I ask is, of that amount, how much do you want your building to cost? And that becomes your budget, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. And I have worked with massive, massive groups that have these churches all across the country. And there's this reluctance to tell me how much they want to spend, because they're like, I'm not telling you how much you're going to spend. That's a secret. Because then, and then they look you dead in the eyes and they go, because you'll spend it. And I'm like, exactly. That's if you trust me, then
Yeah.
you're going to get what you pay for if you tell me how much you want to spend.
Otherwise, you basically just have to make a guess, and then who pays for that guess to get completely re-guessed if they say
Correct.
that's too much money?
And
Let me go
redrawn
call
and
everybody.
everything else.
Yeah.
People don't accidentally end up at the Porsche dealership, and they're like, you know, like in any other industry, it doesn't make any sense. Like they end up at the Porsche industry, you know, Porsche dealership with their wife and their 4 kids, and they're like, what would fit all 6 of us? Nothing, nothing at the Porsche dealership.
I also have a $10,000 budget. Is that going to be a problem?
Yeah, nowhere else does it make any sense.
Yeah, that's good. That's.
But a lot of times that's on us, and that's where we get saddled with that, because if we got to that crossroads where we're there with a family of 6 and they really need a 4-wheel drive Yukon or something like that, and we took them, regardless of whether we did it deliberate or not, we took them on accident to the Porsche dealership. That's on us.
Yeah, now you got to gather the troops, replan, reschedule. Even just the administrative burden of just changing the game plan, I think, is just so much inertia behind a decision going in one direction now that has to change, and now you have to work to move things over.
Well, worse than that is you come in behind a different process, like bid build, where they've gone through a big, heavy charrette process at a church, or at for a development parcel. They went through this look, feel, finish long before they ever got into wants and needs of size requirements, and so they've created this flow and look and feel and experience before they figured out what they actually needed, and then they get what they need on paper, and it's always at least 33% over budget, and then you have to redraw.
Yeah, see, that's why. Do you guys offer like pre-construction services as a consulting type thing? Yeah,
I do. So we did it a lot. We had this group out of Texas that we were members of, was the National Association of Church Design Builders. And I know I'm harping on religious facilities a lot, but that's my side of the house that I do. We have 15 of them going right now. So,
oh wow, jeez.
but Chase would say the same thing, that it was born out of this process because we got the luxury, and it has since sort of disbanded into a smaller regional group, but it used to be national, and we had 40 to 50 GCs from all over the country that we had no competitive reason to not tell them our real story. Like there was they're not in our backyard. There was one from every state. And a couple of the big boys had like maybe 2 states that they got earlier on in the group, and it had been going on for 30 years like this. And we would fly every year to Dallas to that office, and these guys got an opportunity. We shared best contracting methodologies. We shared, war stories with clients on how to make each other better, and it became this iron sharpening iron process to make everybody better, because we were never going to end up on anybody's bid sheet or be taking any work from anybody in the room.
Yeah, that's good, because that's what the industry needs. That's part of the motivation behind what we're doing now.
Yeah,
is trying to kind of reestablish trust. And we're hoping to get a few of our clients that we've maybe lost a little bit of trust with over the years too, and just get in and have this conversation, just to encourage that, because it's a litigious kind of industry, or finger pointing if it's not that much, and it's just like it's so easy to get on the other side of that.
Well, and hat in hand, come in after the fact, and you get the opportunity to just say your piece. Like I have done that so many times where I've come back with a client where we'd done 4 or 5 jobs with, and then all of a sudden we did one. It was a bank. It was a fairly large franchise bank that has gone now public, but it was locally started here, and we just dropped off the map with them. We never got called back. We did a bunch of design build work with them. We never got a call, and I just picked up the phone one day and called their CEO, and I was like, "Hey man, what happened? Like, I see you building with a lot of other people. We don't even get a call to even come look at it."
Yeah.
And they said, "You remember when you built our main office? You kind of left us hanging." I was like, "How?" And then so come to find out, it was a miscommunication between we finally got back to the email of where we were delivering as-built, and the final documentation handoff had been per a contract that we had with the architect. But the architect's contract with the owner was different. So we sent it all to the architect, and the architect thought he was getting his copy, when in all actuality, he was getting the copy for him and the owner. And we fleshed that back out through email and found, we called the architect. He was like, "Yeah, I actually still have both of those sets."
Wow.
And I got to take it that day and be like, "Hey, dude, this is why."
Wow.
But it could be something as simple as that.
Wow.
That it just a difference of opinion, or a difference of how it should have wrapped up. And the whole thing was fine up until then.
That's amazing, because you'll never know if you don't ask that question either. Like how could you possibly know that happened?
Yeah, because I didn't hire the architects. I didn't know what his document said.
And that the nature of the way contracts are built in this industry is just leads to that. We talk about the owner contributing to a lot of this, and it's not even their fault in many ways. It's just they're not the professional, and they don't know the contract relationships or how it might be structured, and then that's nuanced, and then they'll be like, oh, they screwed me over, and you're like, wait, what? Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
A year later, 2 years later, sorry, I didn't even know you wanted this.
Don't assume malice, and know that sometimes people are assuming malice about you, even if it wasn't there.
Yeah, that's a big one for us. We have like a little list of 10 commandments that we're trying to follow and prove ourselves as consultants in the industry. One at the top of the list is never assume malice, just because it's so easy to see an email and just misinterpret it. Just like, you know what, even if it's so obviously dead on, like they're being, that way, don't assume malice, and just let your mind reset and just keep it as friendly for that trust hurdle you talked about. Otherwise, you just start with guaranteed never crossing it. The walls get built up, and so that's really helped us. As we've changed our internal processes. I feel like we got a good team that has a good approachable a chattable team. But even so, that's so important. Just remind yourself before I have this phone call, never assume malice. Let me try to be friendly here first. Then, sometimes conflicts happen, but that's been a game changer. Almost like 9 out of 10 otherwise would have been a bad situation. Changed it.
Everyone's always a little bit on edge anyway, So if you go into it assuming malice, it's easy just to push it over the edge, and then you got something that's blown way out of proportion.
Well, in that one project that we're talking about, that we have the HAC with the coordination in this couple offices, they started the process through this franchise kind of church-based process group. I'm not saying any names here, but at the end of the day, they're out of state and they don't really understand the nuances of tying into this building that they didn't construct. And if it's a standalone church and you're going with this bigger franchise group, I mean, they come with their own issues being out of state, but it's a little easier to act like you're in a vacuum when it's a completely brand new thing. So it became this, they had to pivot from this guy to go to a different guy. And then that ball started rolling is when I finally came into the process. And the pastor is now talking about doing another location. Because even when we finish the one we're on now, they will almost be at capacity to where, I mean, God's in what they're doing right now to the point where it's growing so fast that when we get finished, it'll be full. So
we did this chat. No, never mind.
That project. He called me and he's like, Stuart, this has been painful to get the plane off the ground to this level where we're starting to get to cruising altitude. What would you do different? And I kind of spent that afternoon diving into our normal process, like we would have went through to get to this point. And he goes, man, that's how this is supposed to go. And it's funny because Chase always says that our favorite client is the one that's already been through the process and sort of been punched in the gut by the bad of the industry. Not that we wish anybody to be taken advantage of, but you understand the difference between the two folks that drive the same color white pickup truck with a ladder rack and how different they can be.
The imagery.
Because that process is supposed to be fun. You're spending millions of dollars on the growth of your community for your community. You're being, stewards of this kingdom-minded dollars that is a lot of responsibility in that. And it should be fun. It shouldn't be this painful event.
That's the HVAC. We go back to that just because that's my world. But the money, I always say the same thing about the team. Just remember how much money this represents. Every decision here, it's real money that somebody's buying, and we have to try to do our best to explain to them the good, the bad, the ugly of their budget constraints. Because at the end of the day, if they're spending 40 grand to install this thing, it's still 40 grand, and it's like the Geo Metro version of it. So like, let them know. And just had a consulting meeting with a restaurant. The same thing happened. Like, all right, we'll take the DOAS out, but you got to make your hood smaller. We kind of value engineered or feature reduced, I like to call it.
Feature shrinking.
Yeah, feature shrinking. And so I said, you're going to have to reduce your hood size. And we finally got there. And then they went for standard rooftop package units because they're cheaper, easier to get. I was like, just at least give me reheat, dehumidification on these things. Like otherwise, if you don't put that one feature, which is not a DOAS, but it's basically DOAS's funky, weird cousin. That's what, like the pitch, try to get somebody a little laugh, when I'm making this pitch, to spend a little bit more money, and they're already peak a budget. I was like, otherwise, if you don't just spend this extra 5-10 grand for this feature, you really might as well just take your 40 grand or however much this is, 80, and just burn it. because you're going to turn these things on. Buyer's remorse. It's going to be a pain, and you're going to think that I messed up the engineering.
Yeah.
But it's not illegal to be uncomfortable. But that communication and that conversation throughout all that, and understanding how much it still is to that person. That money is still a lot of money, even when they have to buy something that sucks.
Well, regardless, and that goes for the big multi-billionaire developers, all the way down to those two small country churches that were helping.
Yeah.
That were part of an arson fire that hadn't rebuilt anything in those two locations since the 20s. You know what I mean? So, and on that gambit of financial capacity, it's still just as important to the multi-billionaire, because he answers to somebody, whether it's his team or his board or a hedge fund that's pouring into them or something. Because at the end of the day, they need to understand what they're spending their money on, because it's all a metric of some sort.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Will have to wrap up now, but I really appreciate you doing this,
thank
Stuart.
y'all.
I mean, we could talk another 2 hours on this nerdy stuff, but luckily,
no one would listen to it.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get a couple of really good clips, because and I'll send them to you before. But yeah, this has been great. Phil, thanks for tuning in. This has been the best.
I do a closing? A very important closing question to finish everything out. Are you guys open to that?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
Shoot.
Okay, we're talking about the dentist office treasure chest. You're a little kid. You just got your teeth cleaned. What are you picking out of that bad boy?
Man, I got to go spider ring, because that's what Papa said to do.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I'm a sticky hand guy.
Ooh,
Yeah. Sticky hands, or those little goblins that are like a ring, but they're squishy and they have like weird arms and have like a light inside of them. But it's like
I know what you mean.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you
Goblin
mean.
rings.
So
Yeah.
I think it goes on this like a finger puppet. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, those
yeah.
those there too. Yeah, finger puppet goblins.
Oh, they go on the tip of your finger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they have like wobbly hands.
Yeah.
I think if it wasn't for my grandfather having that saying, I'm a little bit older than y'all, but I think they got rid of them because they just trashed everybody's walls. It was like the sticky hand, but it was a person like Stretch Armstrong or something, and you would huck it against the wall, and it would like fold itself down the wall, and it would leave this trail of like red or green or whatever it was down the drywall. So I probably would have picked that.
What about you, Carter?
Spider ring's a good one. Did they used to have those? What are those?
Chinese
finger traps?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are classic too. Maybe more like a Swaders, like an arcade type of deal. I don't know if those were at the dentist, but
There's always dum-dums and suckers in there, but that's never,
the parachute guy. That's
You don't
a
want to risk
classic.
getting seen at the dentist going there.
Getting candy, yeah.
They're putting you on the naughty list right there.
That's
Like,
the barbershop, not the dentist.
Yeah. Oh man, good question to wrap it up, Phil. I really like that. Again, Kenny and Carter here. Phil, we're all from Permit Zip. We're talking to Stuart Evans from Evans Construction. He and his brother run an amazing firm. We've done a lot of business with them, and appreciate your time. And I'll go give us the formal. Oh no, it's not working.
Turn it up.
Do it. Oh, there we go. We have to now give us the roll out music.
That's right.
Appreciate it. We look forward to talking to you again sometime soon on the tour when we maybe
absolutely
make some pizza together.
yeah,
Absolutely.
A little bit more fun next time.
All right.